Greetings, everyone. It is Gleekon here again. An extra special episode of Lore of Warcraft. Extra special, just I don't know what makes it extra special. That we're going to be halfway through our third book in the trilogy, and we have some slight hope for our heroes here on a couple of these things. But things are still looking pretty dark, pretty grim. This is definitely not a feel-good story. Okay, stay a while and listen as we dive into Chapter 11 of the Sundering, third book in the War of the Ancients trilogy. To an orc, blood was the ultimate tie. It bound oaths, commanded allegiances, and marked the true warrior in combat. To taint a blood bond was one of the worst crimes imaginable, and now the druid's brother had done just that. Yeah, he's pretty low. This is a low point for him. Brock eyed Illidan's storm rage with a loathing he had granted few other creatures. Even the demons he respected more, for they were but true to their nature, however perverse and evil it was. Yet here was one who had fought beside Brox and the others, who was twin to Malfurion, and therefore should have shared his love and concern for his comrades. Illidan, however, lived only for power, and nothing, not even his closest kin, could change that. Had his arms not been tightly bound, the orc would have gladly sacrificed himself tackling the sorcerer and snapping his neck. Whatever faults he considered himself to have, the orc would have never willingly betrayed others. As for Malfurion, the druid stumbled alongside the graying warrior, their arms tied behind their backs and ropes around their waists tugging them after the night sabers. The pair could barely keep up. Illidan's brother had an even worse disadvantage, for the treacherous twin had not yet removed the spell of blindness. Eyes covered by small black shadows that no light could pierce, Malfurion continued to flounder and fall, scraping and cutting himself constantly, and even once nearly smashing his head on a rock. From the blindfolded sorcerer, there came no sign of regret. Each time Malfurion tripped, Illidan merely tugged on the rope until the druid managed to right himself. Then the guards behind the prisoner would prod them forward, and the trek would continue. Brox eyed his axe, now hanging from the cat ridden by the scarred officer. The orc had already marked this Captain Verothen as the other prime target, should circumstance enable Malfurion and him to free themselves. The demon warriors were dangerous, true, but they lacked the devious cunning Brox saw in the other night elf. Even Illidan was second in some regards. Still, if the spirits blessed him, Brox would slay them both. Then, if it was at all possible, something would have to be done about the demon soul. Curiously, it was not Illidan who carried it now, but moments after the sorcerer had retrieved it from his brother, the captain had walked up to the treacherous twin, stretched out a gauntleted hand, and demanded Illidan give it over. Even more curious, Malfurion's brother had complied without so much as a word of protest. But such mysteries could not concern the green-skinned fighter. He only knew that he had to slay the pair, then take the demon soul from Verothen's body. Of course, to do that, all the orc had to do first was break free of his bonds and likely battle his way through the demons. Brox snorted in self-derision. The heroes in the epics always managed to accomplish such things, but it was doubtful that he would. Captain Verothen had a clear talent for tying rope. He had secured his prisoners all too well. On and on they trudged, leaving the lair of the Black Dragon further behind. However, Brox did not travel with the confidence of Illidan and the captain. He was certain that Deathwing would find them. It was a puzzle that the giant had not appeared already. Had something distracted him? Eyes widening, he suddenly grunted at his own ignorance. Yes, the orc finally realized, something had. Something, or rather someone. Krasis. Brox understood well the sacrifice the mage might be making. Elder One, I wish you well. I will sing of you, for what little time I still live. Brox looked just in time to see Malfurion fall again. This time, though, the druid managed to twist. Instead of landing on his face, he did so on his side. The action saved him from a bloody nose, although clearly Malfurion had still shaken every bone in his body. Try as he might, the orc could do nothing to aid the fallen night elf. Gritting his teeth, he glared at Illidan. Give him his sight, he'll walk better then. The sorcerer adjusted the scarf over his own eyes. Brox had seen just enough to know that something terrible had happened to them. Give him back his sight. Why should I? The beast has a point, Captain Verothen abruptly interrupted.
Your brother slows us down too much. Either let me slit his throat here and now, or give him eyes so that he can see the trail."
Illidan gave him a sardonic smile. "Such tempting choices. Oh, very well. Bring him forth." Two of the demons pushed Malfurion forward at the points of their weapons. To his credit, the druid straightened as best he could and marched defiantly toward his twin. "From my eyes to yours," Illidan murmured, "I grant you what I no longer need." He pulled up the scarf. The hair on the back of the orc's neck stiffened as he saw for the first time what lay underneath. Brox uttered an oath to the spirits. Even the monstrous guards next to him shifted uneasily. The shadows faded from Malfurion's own orbs. He blinked, then saw Illidan. The druid, too, gaped in horror at what had befallen his brother's eyes.
"Oh, Illidan,"
Malfurion managed.
"I'm so very sorry."
"About what?" The sorcerer contemptuously replaced the scarf over the ungodly sockets. "I've something much better now. A sense of sight you could only dream of attaining. I've lost nothing. Do you understand me? Nothing." To the officer, Illidan disdainfully commented, "He should be good to travel now. We can even pick up the pace, I think." Rothan smiled, then gave the command to continue on. Malfurion stumbled toward the orc. Brox guided the night elf to a more staid pacing, then muttered,
"Sorry I am about your brother."
"Illidan's chosen his path," the druid said in a much more gentle tone than the orc would have used.
"He betrays us."
"Does he?" Malfurion stared hard at his twin's back. "Does he?" Shaking his head at his companion's wishful thinking, the orc gave up. They moved on, the shrouded day aging. Their captors rode with little concern, but Brox kept glancing back at the mountain chain, certain that Deathwing would make his appearance at any moment.
"Tell me, sorcerer,"
the scarred officer suddenly said after more than an hour of silence.
"This disc does everything you've told us."
"Everything and more. You know what it did to the Legion and the Night Elves, and even against the dragons."
"Yes."
York could hear the avarice in Verothan's voice. Only now did he notice the way the captain's hand kept caressing the pouch containing the demon soul.
"All true, eh?"
"Just ask Archimond if you like." Verothan's hand pulled from the pouch. The soldier had enough sense to respect the power of the great demon. "It should be powerful enough to transform the portal to Sargeras' desire," Illidan continued. "The rest of the Legion will then be able to enter Kalimdor, with Sargeras himself at their head." Malfurion gasped, and even Brox grunted in revulsion. They looked aghast at one another, well aware that no force would be able to withstand both the Demon Lord and his full host.
"Must do something,"
Brox quietly urged, testing his muscles against the ropes and regrettably finding the ropes still the stronger.
"I have been," the druid whispered back, "since Illidan gave me my eyes back. I couldn't concentrate before that because I kept falling, but now that's no problem."
Making certain that the demon still paid the no mind, Brox growled,
"How?"
"The cats. I've been talking with them, convincing them." York's brow furrowed, and he recalled how Malfurion had mentally spoken with animals in the past.
"I'll be ready, druid. It is soon, you think?"
"It's been harder than I thought. They've been tainted by the Legion's presence, but I think, yes. Be ready. They should act any moment now." At first there was no obvious sign of success, but then Captain Verothan's mount balked. The captain kicked at the animal, but the Nightsaber would not move.
"What's the matter with this damned—"
Verothan got no farther, for the panther abruptly reared. Caught by surprise, the officer rolled off the creature's back. Illidan started to look over his shoulder, but then his own mount did as the first. However, the sorcerer was better prepared, and although he slid from his seat, he was not toppled.
"You fool!"
Illidan blurted, although to who it was impossible to say.
"You stupid—"
Brox acted the moment the cats turned on their riders. He ran toward Captain Verothan's mount, seeking his axe. The Nightsaber obliged him by turning its flank toward the orc, surely a command given by Malfurion. Spinning around, Brox presented his bound limbs to the axe head. The ever-sharp edge severed the ropes easily and only nicked the warrior's right arm. Brox seized his weapon.
"Druid, to me! We can ride this beast out!"
But the Nightsaber bounded past him. With its head, it rammed a fell guard seeking to run Malfurion through. The other demons backed away, momentarily uncertain what to make of the mad situation. The cat, meanwhile, began gnawing on Malfurion's ropes. Gazing at Brox, the Night Elf shouted, "Never mind me! The pouch, Brox! The pouch!" The orc looked to where Varothan had landed. The palace officer sat rubbing his head, the pouch holding the demon soul still dangling from his belt. He did not seem aware of the nearby presence of Brox. Raising his axe high, the orc charged the captain. However, the scarred night elf recovered quicker than Brox hoped. Seeing the huge green form barreling at him, the slim fighter immediately rolled away. As he came to his feet, Varothan drew his sword.
"Come, you lumbering brute," he taunted. "I'll carve you up and feed you to the cats, if they can stomach you."
Brox brought down the axe, and had he struck the elf, Varothan would have been cut in twain. The captain, however, moved like lightning. The orc's weapon cleaved the hard earth, leaving a trench more than a yard long. Varothan leaped forward, jabbing at his foe. The sword cut a crimson line across Brox's left shoulder. Brox ignored the stinging as he hefted the axe for another attempt. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Malfurion direct the riderless nightsaber at the fell guard. The first demon retreated, uncertain as to whether to attack Varothan's mount. That hesitation cost him, the huge panther bringing down the armored figure a moment later and tearing into his throat. Brox tried to spot Illidan, but the need to keep track of his own adversary made that impossible. He hoped Malfurion was watching his brother, one spell by the sorcerer, and they were doomed. He roared as Captain Varothan managed a nastier cut on the same shoulder. The night elf grinned.
"The first rule of war is to never be distracted."
In response, the orc swung his axe in a fearsome arc which narrowly missed decapitating the soldier. Varothan, his demeanor now more serious, backed away.
"Second rule," growled Brox. "Only fools talk so much on the battlefield."
His body suddenly tingled. Brox's movements slowed down, each action growing more and more ponderous. It felt as if the very air around him solidified. Sorcery. Malfurion had not dealt with Illidan, just as the veteran warrior had feared. The familial bond had made the druid hesitant, and now that hesitation would cost them. Captain Varothan's grin returned. He moved with more confidence toward his slowing foe.
"Well, I usually don't like things so easy, but in this case I'll make an exception."
He pointed his sword at Brox's chest.
"I wonder if your heart's in the same place as mine."
But as he approached, a dark shadow enveloped both of them. Brox wanted to look up, but his movements had slowed so much now that he knew that the night elf would gut him before he could lower his head again. If this was to be his death, the orc wanted to stare his slayer in the eyes as a warrior should. But Queen Ajara's servant was not looking at the orc anymore. He, it was, who now gazed high into the heavens, his mouth twisting angrily.
"Away from him, miscreant!"
bellowed a voice from above. As a helpless Brox watched, Varothan, eyes wide, leapt away from the orc. A mere eye blink later, and the area where the treacherous night elf had stood was bathed in flame. Most astounding to Brox, the fire came with such precision that he barely felt the heat. That puzzled him further, for he had assumed rightly that a dragon soared overhead, and surely not just any dragon. Deathwing. But if it had been the sinister black, he would have scarcely avoided endangering Brox. With that in mind, the orc could only imagine one other dragon with such an interest in the party. Corielstraws. I was hoping he was going to come to their aid. In all the chaos since escaping Deathwing's lair, he had forgotten the red, but it seemed the red had not forgotten Malfurion and him.
"Be ready," shouted Corielstraws. "I come!"
Brox could do little, but he braced himself as best he could for what he knew would come, relying on Corielstraws' skills. A moment later, the great claws wrapped around his body, and he was torn into the air. The rush of wind in his face, Brox felt his limbs unstiffen, either by the red's action or some quirk of circumstance. Illidan's spell had lifted. He also noticed for the first time that Malfurion hung in the Leviathan's other paw. The druid looked exhausted and also a bit upset. Malfurion pointed down at the ground far below, shouting something to both the orc and the dragon. Brox finally made out his words. "The disc!" Malfurion cried. "They still have the disc!" The orc started to respond, but Corielstraws suddenly arced, heading back toward the site of the struggle. The dragon dove toward the party, eyeing each figure.
"Which one?"
The giant roared.
"Which one?"
He need not have asked. Captain Varothan, his hand already in the pouch, pulled free the demon soul. Brox recalled the troubles Malfurion had first suffered trying to make the disc work and hoped that the scarred officer would have the same problem. And it seemed that fortune was with them, for Varothan raised the disc with evil intent clearly in his mind, but the demon soul did nothing. Roaring, Corielstraws closed on the captain. Varothan's expression grew dismayed. But then against all logic, the disc flared bright. Another voice called from above the dragon's head. I don't know who it is.
Away, quickly, or else we are all.
I don't know. What struck the red was clearly but a fraction of the demon soul's might, but it was enough. Brox himself felt the repercussion of the shockwave that hit Corielstra's dead on. The dragon quivered, moaned, and ceased flapping his wings. The Leviathan veered back toward the peaks. The ground rushed up. Brox began reciting the names of his ancestors, calling on them to ready themselves for his coming. The unyielding side of a granite mountain filled his gaze.
What did you do?
Illidan snapped.
I used the disc.
Captain Verothen replied, his tone initially filled with awe. Then awareness returned and he studied both the piece and his companion.
You were right. Everything you said and more. One could become an emperor with it, and one could be flayed alive by Sargeras for even thinking such.
The temptation crossing the officer's face vanished.
And rightly should they be, sorcerer. I trust you've not entertained such a foolish notion.
Malfurion's twin smiled ever so briefly.
No more than you would, dear captain. The Queen will be most pleased by the results of our quest. The soul secured, its power proven on a full-grown red dragon, and the end of two of those most responsible for the delays thus far.
You could have used the disc differently, the sorcerer pointed out,
and saved the pair for questioning.
Verothen scoffed.
What could they tell us that we need to know now? This,
he thrust the disc toward Illidan,
is all that is required for victory.
The other night elf leaned forward, his mouth bending down cruelly.
Unless you've some remorse concerning your brother, some disloyal regret.
Adjusting his scarf, Illidan snorted. You saw how I treated him. Does that look like brotherly love?
A point well taken,
his companion said after a time. The captain thrust the disc back into the pouch. As he did, his brow furrowed slightly.
Something else wrong, Captain? No, just stop. There were voices. No, nothing.
He did not notice Illidan's studious expression, which vanished the moment the officer looked at the sorcerer again.
I think it nothing. Now come. The cats are under control again. We need to get the disc back to Zinajara as soon as possible, don't we?
Of course. Verothen secured his animal and mounted. Illidan did likewise, but as he climbed up, he took the moment to briefly look back at the mountains. Looked back and frowned bitterly. They should have been back by now, so Ronan thought as he stared in the direction that Krasis and the others had ridden. They should have been back. Somehow he knew something had gone wrong. When the Night Sabers had returned with the Elder Mage's note, the humans' hopes had risen. Corielstra's should have enabled the party to make much quicker time. They should have reached their destination long ago, and surely Krasis would have wasted no time in attempting to secure the demon soul. Yes, something had gone terribly wrong. He mentioned none of this to Jared, who had his own mountain of troubles. It was not that the meeting in Black Forest's tent had gone awry. On the contrary, just by being himself, Shadowsong had cemented his position as commander. At some time during the last battle, the former guard captain had reached a point where he could not stand by and let foolish orders, whatever the cast of their source, pass as wise counsel. When another noble had suggested a flanking maneuver that would have likely ended with the host fragmented, Jared had started in, explaining why such would only create a debacle that would destroy the Night Elves. That he had to make this clear to what should have been the most learned of his race astounded the human. In the end, Jared had managed to turn every noble there into his loyal followers, so relieved were they to have someone who appeared to have an instinctive grasp of tactics. Ronan had at first assumed that he would have to secretly guide Jared, but the young Night Elf did know what he was doing. The wizard had seen Jared's kind before, born with an ability the greatest learning could not surpass, and gave thanks to Elune and whatever other deity might have been responsible for granting the defenders someone to take Ravencrest's place. But with the quest for the disc in jeopardy, would even Jared be enough? Jared joined the wizard. The reluctant leader of the host wore a newly polished set of armor given to him by Black Forest, one that bore no crest, but did have red and orange arcs running down both sides to the waist. The cloak was likewise colored and flowed about him like a possessive lover. It's a weird description. He now also had a crested helmet, the fiery tail made from dyed nightsaber hair, dangling below his neck. Behind him came his ever-present retinue, sub-officers and liaisons for the varying noble leaders. Jared paused to wave the group away from him before finally speaking. Once I'd have dreamt of no greater honor than to rise to a rank of privilege and wear the fine garments appropriate to my new station, Jared remarked dourly. Now I just feel like I look like a buffoon. You won't get much argument from me, Ronan admitted, but it impresses the lot, so you'll have to make do with it, at least for now. When your authority's stronger, you can begin dispensing with the trappings piece by piece. I can hardly wait. The wizard led him farther away. Cheer up, Jared. It won't do if your people see their new hope looking so bleak. They might fear for their chances. I fear for our chances, especially with me in command. The human would not permit him such talk. Leaning close, Ronan snapped, Thanks to you, we live. Yes, that includes me too. You will come to terms with this. We've heard nothing yet from the others, which means that you, I, and those dying in battle may be the only hope for Kalimdor. The only hope for the future. He did not elaborate, for it would have been beyond even the erstwhile officer to come to grips with the truth. That Ronan was from a period perhaps 10,000 years later. How could the wizard explain that he fought not only for those who lived, but for those yet to be born, including the ones he loved most? I never asked for this, protested Jared. Neither did the rest of us. The night elf sighed. Removing the garish helmet, he wiped his forehead. You're right, Master Ronan. Forgive me. I'll do whatever I can, even if I can't promise it'll be much. Just keep doing what you're doing. The right thing. You turn into another Desdal Star-Eye, and we're all lost. The new commander gazed down at his finery, sneering at its impeccable state. Little enough chance of that, I promise. That brought a smile to the wizard. Good to hear. A horn blared. A battle horn. Ronan looked over his shoulder. That's coming from far down the right flank. There shouldn't be any Legion force there. They could never get around without us knowing it. Jared clamped on his helmet. But it appears that they have. He waved the soldiers back over to him. Mount up and bring me my own cat. The wizards also. We need to see what's happening over there now. They brought the animals with an efficiency that Ronan had not noted under the leadership of Star-Eye. These soldiers truly respected Jared. It was not merely that he now had the backing of so many important, if impotent, nobles. Word had already spread of his deeds and how he had taken the reins in the moment when everyone else had believed the cause lost. As the former captain, the spellcaster had to remind himself, mounted, a new transformation seemed to overcome him. A grim determination spread across his once innocent countenance. He urged his lightsaber on, quickly pushing ahead of Ronan and the others. The horn sounded again. The wizard noted that it was a night elven horn. One of Jared's first commands, and the one that had proven he had the nobles' backing, was to blend the host and its allies better. No longer were Holmes and Dungard's people off to one side. Now each element of Night Elf military had its own contingent of outsiders whose skills augmented, not detracted. Even the Furbolgs had their part to play, strengthening wedges and using their clubs to crack the skulls of any Felguard who tried to reach the valued sorcerers and archers further back. This would be a cool, RTS game. With those different, you could get, different Tauren troops and Furbolgs. That would actually be cool. Many of the changes, maybe there is something in Warcraft 3. I don't know. I never played that. Many of the changes were simple or subtle, and it amazed Ronan that he had not thought of them himself. However, now something had come to truly test the revamped host. A ploy no one could have expected from Archimond. Yet as they neared, it was not quite a battle that they confronted, but rather a confusion. Night Elves sought to bring weapons into play, but the Tauren and Earthen that Ronan saw appeared to have no interest in playing any part in their own defense. They stood idly by as their allies frantically tried to fill the gaps that they created by their inaction. What by the Mother Moon are they doing? Jared demanded to the air. They undermine everything. I finally had the nobles convinced of their necessity. Ronan started to answer, but just then he became aware of something far beyond the line. The enemy was even closer than he could have imagined. The wizard made out hulking forms, winged creatures, and a vast variety of ominous shapes that he, who would face the Legion in the future, still could not identify. Oddly, they moved almost at a walking pace, and from them Ronan heard no blood-curdling calls. There were giants among them, too. Giants that dwarfed any demon of which the wizard was familiar. The winged forms did not remind him of Doomguard, and although there were other flying horrors among the Burning Legion, he could not recall any matching those approaching. Jared reined his lightsaber to a halt near a Tauren that turned out to be none other than Holm. What's the matter? Why aren't you fighting? The Tauren leader blinked and looked at Jared as if the questions made no sense.
We will not fight these. It would be unthinkable.
A pair of earthen nearby echoed his words with stern nods. Jared at first looked dismayed, then his expression turned resolute. Then we will fight them ourselves, he growled, riding past the Tauren. But Ronan had grown very suspicious concerning the reasons for the allies' reticence. Wait, Jared! Master Ronan, not you too! The oncoming horde was now close enough that the wizard could make out some individual features, enough to verify for him that he had been correct in calling the Night Elf back. They're not the Legion. They've come to join us, I'm sure of that. He was even more certain when he saw that which led them, a towering creature moving on 4 swift legs and atop whose shaggy head was a rack of magnificent antlers. The gargantuan being was followed closely by scores of creatures resembling satyrs in that their upper torsos were like those of night elves, but their lower bodies were instead those of fauns, and they were all young beautiful females. They seemed almost as much plant as animal, their skin covered in sleek green leaves. While more delicate looking in some ways, there was that about their demeanors that made him suspect that any foe would regret confronting them. They've got dryads now, finally got the demigods' aid. Already caught up in their preparations, the soldiers paid this figure no mind. Ronan realized that a catastrophe of great proportions would quickly take place if he did not put a stop to things. Jared, ride up with me quick! With the night elf in tow, the crimson-tressed wizard urged his mount past startled soldiers. Jared caught up to him, shouting, Are you mad? What do you do? Are you mad? What are you doing? Trust me, they are allies. The figure in the lead suddenly loomed over him. Startled, Ronan barely reined in time.
Greetings, Ronan Redhair,
boomed the antlered being. The female figures eyed the wizard with curiosity.
We come to join the fight for our precious realm,
He studied Jared's shadow song.
Is this the one with whom we must coordinate our actions?
The human glanced at his companion, who sat open-mouthed. He is. Forgive him. I find myself a little astonished by your coming as well, Cenarius.
Cenarius?
Muttered Jared.
The Forest Lord.
Yes, and I believe he's brought some august company with him, Ronan added, peering beyond the mythic guardian. It was as if the tales of his childhood had come to life, and indeed, perhaps that was the most apt description. Ronan and the Night Elf gazed up, often high up, at giants known only from the dreams of mortals. For all his height, the Forest Lord was dwarfed by some of his companions. A pair of twin bear-like creatures like veritable mountains flanked Cenarius, one eyeing Ronan with particular interest. Beyond them, and only slightly smaller, a being resembling a wolverine with 6 limbs and a serpentine tail, eagerly surveyed the distant battlefield. His breath came in hungry pants, and his massive claws raked the ground, creating massive grooves. That makes me think of an old Dungeons and Dragons monster. Can't remember what it's called, but it's basically like a 6-legged badger with impenetrable fur. Starts with an A or B. I think it starts with a B. Towering over almost everything else was a humongous tusked boar with a mane of sharp, even deadly thorns. A name came unbidden from Ronan's early studies, Agamagan, a demigod of primal fury. Agamagan. Gamagan? I don't remember how it's pronounced. Some were not so overwhelming, but were no less stunning. There was a beautiful yet dangerous-looking bird woman around whom flocks of avians abounded. A tiny red fox with a sly yet gnomish visage scurried between the legs of the giants, and darting around many of the demigods were minute sword-wielding men with butterfly wings, pixies of a sort. We've got all these other little races now coming in that you see in Shadowlands and stuff. A shape pure white flashed by at the edge of the wizard's gaze. He immediately sought out the source but found nothing. Yet an image remained burned in his thoughts, that of a huge stag with antlers that seemed to reach the heavens. A lot of these cool things that you see in Shadowlands. And the other side and stuff like that. And on it went, male figures with hooded faces in whose flesh what little there was visible was oak bark. Hippogriffs and griffins fluttered in the air, and creatures resembling giant stick bugs with humanoid forms swayed patiently in the wind. I don't know what that one is. Further on, there were scores of other unique figures, some of whom the wizard would have been hard-pressed to describe even while staring at them, but all of whom bore marked resemblance to some particular aspect of the natural world. And even from where he stood, Ronan could sense the energy surrounding each. The natural forces of the world embodied by those created first to protect it from harm. Jared Shadowsong, the wizard managed, may I introduce to you the demigods of Kalimdor. All of them.
At your command,
Cenarius added respectfully, his front legs falling to a kneeling position. Behind him, the others followed suit in their own manner. The new leader of the host swallowed, unable to speak. Ronan took a quick look behind himself. Everywhere, soldiers, Tauren, Furbolgs, Earthen, and more watched the tableau in awe. Most now recognized that these newcomers were beings of tremendous age and power, the Ancients, all of whom were now acknowledging Jared as the one from whom they would take their cues in battle. Cenarius rose, eyeing the Night Elf as one did an equal.
We await your word.
And to his credit, the former guard captain straightened, replying, You are all very welcome, Elder One. Your strength is greatly appreciated. With any luck, we have a good chance of surviving. The Forest Lord nodded, his eyes looking beyond Jared to the other mortal defenders. A determined expression steeled Cenarius' bearded countenance.
Yes, you have it right, Lord Shadowsong. We have a chance.
Pretty cool. Gotta say, this is a high mark. This is the coolest book so far of the trilogy. I like it. I think this is pretty neat that they're all there and all willing to now start fighting. That's a big boon. I look forward to seeing where the rest of these battles go, how the rest of this war goes. We're at the halfway point of the book, so we still have a lot to do. It's going to get darker. There's going to be bad stuff. You know that it always, just basic writing 101. Things are going to get dark before it gets brighter. I would imagine they're going to keep us going along for the next 5-6 chapters, and things are going to hit a dark point. That's my prediction. About 5 or 6 episodes from now, maybe even 7-8, it's going to look like terrible. Okay, guys, I hope you're enjoying this as much as me. We got another episode in the pipes 5x5, and I really look forward to continuing it and seeing you guys all in the next episode of Lore of Warcraft.